All right, what I want to do for you guys today is I want to do a couple, um, I want to do a couple of examples. Oh man, hopefully. There we go. I want to do a couple of examples today from your homework. So what I want to first talk about is I want to talk about section 1.4, number 46. So, number 46, there were just enough of you that did this, messed up a little bit on this one, that I just want to make sure everyone's on the same page and that we're feeling good about this. So this says use limits to find or to, derive f prime of x. And the function that we were looking at, and this is for the function f of x equals the square root of x squared plus 1. So this is the first one I want to do for you today. I also want to do one of your homework problems from section 1.5, number 30, that was totally my fault because when in your lecture for 1.5, I just did not tell you how to do it correctly. So I want to do number 30 for you from your homework. But first of all, let's talk about number 46. So a couple things I want you to understand. When I ask you to use limits or on the test, what I will say is use the definition of the derivative to find the derivative of the square root of x squared plus 1. So when I say use the definition, this is what I expect you to use. Limit as h goes to 0 of f of x plus h minus f of x all over h, okay? This is the definition of the derivative, and this is what I want you to use. Now, this is up to you if you want to, first simplify this quotient and then bring in the limit, but I need you to bring in the limit at some point, and I need you to carry that limit sign through if you start with it, okay? I know we can figure out the derivative of this using the stuff we learned in 1.6. We could use the general power rule to figure that out, but for right now, for this section, what I'm seeing if you understand is, do you know how to use this definition? So let's go ahead and do this, and I just want to show you kind of what happens. It's pretty cool. And I sent you a video. If you look at the announcements, I know this was a tough one to do, so I had sent you guys some YouTube videos that I had found, that were not me, which is maybe good. Maybe you needed a break from me. That you should have watched. And if you had watched those YouTube videos, you should have been able to kind of figure this out. Also, they do an example like this in your book. So you're kind of at a point in your mathematics. I mean, maybe this is something we start learning in this class, but you should be getting to a point where you can look at examples that are not exactly this one and take some of the ideas from that example and bring it into the one you're working on. So remember what we're going to do here. We are going to multiply by the conjugate. So the conjugate, when we're talking about a conjugate, complex conjugate or just a conjugate when we're dealing with square roots, what the conjugate is everything is the same except for the middle sign. So instead of a negative right here, I'm going to use a positive. And we'll do the same thing. Of course, if I multiply the top by the conjugate, I have to, make sure I'm just multiplying by 1. I can't change the entire function. So I'm going to multiply by the same thing on the bottom. Okay, so I'm going to multiply this guy out. Notice, I also just want to pause to point out, you should try and mimic the way that I do these problems. So when I'm looking at your homework, you should be doing either the way the book does it, that's fine, or the way that I do it. You should be looking at the solutions to the fun sheets. You should be looking at the lectures that I give you. You notice that I have f prime of x equals, and I have all this stuff, and then I'm working below it and working vertically because it's easier to see. Now I might start doing some horizontal stuff over here when I get totally simplified, but a lot of you were like squishing your math in one line, and it was very difficult for me to read. Some of you weren't using equal signs, so it's what I call floating mathematics, and I don't know what step goes to the next one. So I'm going to be pretty strict on that on the test. So you have about 2 more homework assignments to do to get good practice at that. So please work on that. If you have any questions about how to do that, or you want some suggestions on how to make that easier, please just let me know. All right, so I'm going to multiply these guys. So what am I going to do? I'm going to FOIL this. The whole idea of multiplying by the conjugate is it should get rid of the square roots. So when I multiply these first 2 right here, this is my first, right? Notice that what is under the square root is exactly the same for both of them. So what that does for square root is it cancels everything out. Or excuse me, not everything, it cancels out the square roots. So I'm just left with x plus h quantity squared plus 1, okay? That's it, sorry. Now, so I'm just left with the x plus h quantity squared plus 1. Now notice what happens when I do the outside here, that's my outside, and when I do my inside here, that's my inside. If you notice, this outside here is just this guy without the h times this guy with the h, positive. And then the inside is the same thing. This guy without the h, this guy with the h, but it's negative. So what happens is you basically have your outside plus a negative of your inside, and they're exactly the same, so they cancel out. Okay, that's the whole reason we multiply by a conjugate. So the insides cancel out, and now what's the last thing I need to do is I need to do the last for my FOIL. So same thing as my first here. I have a negative times a positive, so that's negative. These two are exactly the same underneath the square root. So the square root cancels, and I just get that. In the denominator, I affectionately call all of this crap. But it actually turns out to be pretty nice once we simplify it. All right. And I just have to write it. There's nothing I can do. I would not don't FOIL this out. Some of you did, and that's fine. It's not that there was anything wrong with that. I just have no need to FOIL this out. What do I know is going to happen? This h should cancel, and so this h right here is eventually going to go to 0. So don't FOIL that all out. It's kind of a waste of time. All right. Now we need to do, I had an advisor in college when I was teaching Calc 1 in graduate school who used to tell me that calculus is easy. It's the algebra that's hard. Which is so true. We haven't even done any calculus yet. All of this is just algebra, which is okay. That's part of life in the math world. So what have I done here? I FOILed out that x plus h quantity squared. That guy you should be pretty good at FOILing out by now because it's going to come up quite a bit. And then I just distribute my negative through. Now write down all this again. I am a lazy mathematician just like the rest of them, but I want to make sure that my equals sign is true, so I want to make sure I rewrite all this again, right? Just so my reader knows that the only thing I've done is mess with the numerator. Okay, so now this is the fun part. Let's cancel out the x squareds. I know you're like, but Sarah, isn't all of it fun? And yes, it is. I agree. Now, just for, on a test or something, I'm okay if you maybe do a little bit of side work here. If it was my test, I would probably do another line to show that this is true. But I just wanted to show you, I'm going to take an h out, so for the sake of trying to keep this all on one page, I'm going to show you that those h's cancel. Okay, that's what should happen. Once everything canceled, I was left with only things that involved h, which allowed me to factor that h out and cancel with the 1 in the denominator. Now look at how my equal signs are all lined up nicely. That's not a huge deal, but it helps me read and know where you're going. And then notice I'm writing the limit sign because I have not taken the limit yet. All right, so those h's cancel, and here's what I'm left with. So I have x plus h quantity squared plus 1 under the square root plus the square root of x squared plus 1. Okay, now I can let h go to 0. Now when I let h go to 0, nothing bad happens. I don't get any zeros in the denominator, so that guy's gone. That guy's gone, and look at how nice this becomes. What are we left with? And now I don't write the limit because I've taken the limit. I'm left with 2x over, what is this? This now just is x squared plus 1, right? So I have root x squared plus 1 plus root x squared plus 1, also known as 2 of them. And so let me give myself a little bit of room here. What's my final answer then? My final answer is just I'm going to cancel those 2's. I want everything completely simplified. My final answer is x over the square root of x squared plus 1. And you may not simplify that. You cannot break up a square root over addition, so do not do that. If that doesn't make sense, why? Send me an email and I'll write you up a little thing about it. It's pretty easy to see. Also, if you don't know how we got all this up here with all the crazy colors, send me an email and I'll show you how I FOILed that out. Other thing is, you could have taken the derivative of this using the general power rule, right? To just check yourself. I am fine if you check yourself on the test, but you need to show me how you actually do it. Remember from 1.6, what does this say to do? Bring the 1/2 down leave the inside, take 1 away. Oh, this does not look that great, but multiply by the derivative of the inside. The 2's would cancel. What does that negative exponent mean? Throw it on the bottom. What does the 1/2 mean? It's the square root. So, I mean, thank the math gods, right, for section 1.6. But for now, for part of the test, you will need to do 2 problems where you use the definition of the derivative. And I'm either going to give you a fraction or a square root for sure on the test, so you need to make sure you know how to do those. Okay, let's do the one from 1.5. So then I just kept telling you what you need to do. Oops, sorry about that. I don't know why I did that. Okay. I was just telling you what you need to do, and now let's talk about what I need to do, which is not make mistakes on, let's see, which is not make mistakes on your lectures. So let me just show you what I did wrong on your lecture, which, you know, as a teacher, you quickly get over being embarrassed when you make mistakes because it just happens so many times. So it's unfortunate that I was recorded for this mistake on YouTube for all to see. But here's the revenue from sales. So what I want to do is I want to do question 30 for you, which you did on your homework. So 29, A says determine the revenue from selling X copies. So 30 is do exercise 29. If it costs 10 cents per copy for the first 50 copies, 5 cents for every copy exceeding 50, and no setup fee. So here's what we need to consider. So if we're looking at number 30 here, I'm going to let X be the number of copies, okay? And so what I need to do is I need to determine the revenues. So what I want to think about first is, well, what if I have less than 50 copies? Okay, what would my revenue be? So if I have less than 50 copies, R of X, right? And this says no setup fee, so I'm not going to worry about a setup fee. And I have 10 cents per copy. So I can simply do 10 cents per copy, so that would be 10 cents times X. Now, here's where I made, and that's just exactly what I did on that lecture in 1.5. Here's where I made a mistake, though. When I went to X is greater than or equal to 50, I just did 5 cents times X, which I did not consider that for those first 50 problems, those first 50 copies, I'm paying 10 cents. If I just put 5 cents X, right, what am I paying? I'm paying 5 cents for every single copy, 0 to whatever I'm doing, or 1 to whatever I'm doing. So that doesn't make sense because for those first 50, how much do I have to pay for those first 50? I have to pay 10 cents. So when I do my revenue problem here for greater than 50, what I have to think about is, well, I am going to pay 10 cents for the first 50 copies, okay? Now, what am I going to add to this? I am going to add, I'm paying 5 cents for every copy over 50. So if X is the number of copies I want total, how many would I have over 50? Well, I would want to do X minus 50. Think about this. If I have 70 copies, how many do I have over 50? I would have 20, right? So I need to do the number of copies minus those 50 that I have to pay the 10 cents for. And I apologize for that. I can't believe I did that. So this is going to be 5 plus, I'm going to distribute this guy through. I need you to simplify this. Don't put this as your answer. You need to simplify. Minus 2.5, right? If I take 0.05 times 50. And so if I simplify that, my revenue for over 50 copies is going to be this. Okay, and so what would my answer be then? This is not my answer. This is just my work that I want. I would like to see that work. My revenue then is a piecewise function, right? 10 cents per copy, as long as X is less than or equal to 50. And then what's my revenue for anything over 50? That is going to be 2.5 plus 0.05X. for any copy greater than 50. I hope that makes sense. I can't believe I didn't do that. I was just being cocky that day, I think, and I did the lecture without looking at my notes, and you know, I should never do that. So I just went in thinking I'd chat about this and didn't actually stop to think about it. But I hope that makes sense why we have to have that x minus 50 and split this up because of those first 50. And then it asks you, what is the profit from selling X copies if it costs the owner 3 cents per copy? And so again, you can do what we did before. What is profit? Profit is revenue minus cost, and it's 3 cents per copy no matter how many copies there are. So you would just subtract 0.03x from each one of these to get your profit. I hope that makes sense. Again, I am very, very sorry for that. If you have any questions at all about this, everyone got credit for 30 unless you didn't do part of it. A lot of you did not do part B, but if you did it part A and B or tried it and did it the way that I had shown you in the lecture, I still gave you credit for it. So holler at me if you have any questions, and thanks for watching.